If you haven't noticed, society is changing and gaming along with it, as we now have an admission from all the top universities and journalists that the great feminization of gaming is real and it's happening to a video game developer near you, and it's unavoidable. And I think this is the conversation that we're seeing happening all throughout the entertainment industry, where people are wondering what happened to the games that were successful that are now turning into propaganda tools almost, and progressive idealistic messaging apparatuses to deliver something that is totally unrelated to just having fun and playing video games. And I think that is the situation we've been seeing in the Western games development space for a long time now, where gamers are wondering, why would I want to play as this character? What is happening with the story? And where did all the strong, masculine, heroic gaming icons go? And who are all of these other characters that we have to play? And I think this is what we're seeing from a recent article coming out of Compact magazine under Helen Andrews, who has an article named The Great Feminization of the Western World. And I think this is the thing that we see right now happening in the development space for the video gaming industry, where all this topic is coming to a head, where we're seeing gamers realize this is something that's real and is happening, and we have to actually talk about it. But first off, let's talk about the person that wrote the article, Helen Andrews. They're a senior editor at the American Conservative magazine. They published this article called The Great Feminization. It came out a month ago, October 16th, 2025. The core thesis is what we call wokeness, and where do these things derive from, and things related to wokeness like cancel culture, emotional decision-making, and prioritizing consensus over debate. And this is the ideology that they come up with, where they're saying these are more feminine traits that are oriented towards appealing to this demographic of society. And once you have a predominant institution kind of filled with these people, with these emotions and this gender orientation, you have these emotional appeals and cancel culture activated within those spaces. And that is the broader understanding of this article, where it's trying to express that, hey, this started with the increase in promotion of having all these gender equity values within the college institutions. And I think this is the thing that we've been seeing all across the entertainment space. And this article in particular delves deep into the things that happen within the organizations that were infiltrated with these ideologies and filled their spaces with this gender equity balance that kind of changed the dynamics of the culture. Andrew argues that as a woman becomes the majority in the fields like universities, media, and of course politics, they bring the feminine behavioral patterns, empathy over logic, safety and cohesion over risk and competition. She cites examples like Larry Summers at Harvard, where he was fired over some petty disputes and emotional language, and how that emotional language trumped any logic about the situation. She delves deep into these different examples and topics where this was implemented. Of course, she goes over the Me Too and all these other eras where this was applied without reason and logic at the helm. It was more about emotional blackmailing the situation. And I think this is the thing gamers are familiar with, specifically within the gaming environment, because the entire situation within gaming started from this perspective. If you don't know anything about Gamergate, Gamergate started off with emotional blackmail. It started with this idea that, hey, you can't harass this person even if they might be doing something wrong, because they were doing something wrong. A game developer was having intimate relations with journalists to actually get good reviews, and gamers were mad about that, but they were blasted and attacked. And of course, that's some aggressive language that was their only impropriety, but more than anything, that was weaponized against them. This emotional blackmail, when reason and logic is on their side, saying, hey, you can't do something unfair that is ruining the credibility of journalists and the overall integrity of game developers. But that was ignored. The gamers were attacked. And of course, game developers submitted to this attack because they were emotionally blackmailed by the situation. And of course, their ranks were filled with people with a similar ideology of emotional blackmail. We had game developers hire people specifically based on their gender because they felt guilty about the situation. We had even the Last of Us creators saying, hey, we're going to do everything in our power to bring in the people that were making these false accusations to guide our game. This was the state of the gaming industry for a long time, where emotional blackmail was the key to get what you want from the gaming industry. And they established all these tools of emotional blackmail for each group and minority victim class that is out there. And this victim narrative became how you got video games developed, because you had to go to a system of consultancy firms that reinforce this idea. You had to be backed by the journalist institutions that reinforced these ideals and denigrated anything that was the opposite of what they stood for. And that was the element that made the gaming industry fall on dire straits, where gamers just stopped buying these terrible games that came out as a product of it. And I think this is the best example within the industry where we're seeing that be the case, where there's this great feminization that led to the destruction of a lot of the elements in the gaming industry, where gamers are just simply tired of the bad products that are coming out based on this narrative design that has become a crutch. And I think that's the thing gamers are looking at and facing with this consequence of this evolving situation. And I think Helen Andrews brings up a point about this happening in the colleges and universities, but I think for gamers, this is a real thing that we've been seeing happening in the industry so consistently that gamers are almost inundated with every single new release that has these elements that have been influenced by this philosophical trend at the forefront of Western society. And I think to understand this shift, you got to look back how gaming started in arcades and basements, mostly dominated by men. And this is how the community grew in action, because it was this focused group of people that loved video games. And I think that's the thing that is lost in the current day environment, where we had these kind of hyper appealing character designs and of course adventurous and interesting character designs. And I think that is the thing at the core and focus of the market, because the industry was 90% male back in the 90s and early 2000s. But as gaming grew to a $184 billion industry, women players were inevitable to be there. And this minor surge led to a little backlash from the core gaming base. But of course, this was used as kind of an Achilles heel to the industry itself for this ideological invasion, because set at the basis, we had people kind of obscuring this high demographic that is actually playing video games, where we had some of these reports and polls coming out saying it's over 48% women, over 51% women playing video games, when in actuality, that's not the case. We've seen the opposite, where it's almost 85% male still to this day. But of course, they're including obscure numbers that include people playing video games on mobile devices once every 2 years. And that is decided as being a gamer. And this obfuscation of the facts is what's being used against the gaming community right now to convince game developers, investment banks, and consultancy firms to attack and introduce these elements where gaming is now being seen as something that is predominantly feminine. And that's the thing that we keep seeing now dominating the gaming space, something being made in the orientation of a feminized organization. And that's why we have this installation of just removing almost all these feminine aspects within the gaming industry, where these things are seen as abhorrent because they're against the overall ideological trend of the people that are seen as the face of the gaming industry, when that is just simply not the actual case of the situation. But that doesn't stop developers from actually focusing on these elements when they produce games. You see it so starkly with the character models that are coming out nowadays, where people look at character models now and they just see something that is highly unappealing to the male gaze and the male audience. But that is just not the focus of a lot of the groups within these organizations, because they have obscure facts that are appealing to the emotions of the people that want to see gaming be a 50-50 kind of split in demographics, when that is just not the reality. And when statistics are being run by these emotional arguments, these logical fallacies, it's what's destroying a lot of the games before they even come out. And I think that's the thing that we see with so much titles, where they're so focused on being the antithesis of what the male audience wants, because it's being driven by people that are really not gamers, or aren't there for ideological reasons and to capture the audience that is there. And I think since gaming has become almost $1 trillion industry, people want to ideological capture the gaming audience. And that's why we have this kind of basic monotonous structure for a lot of the looks of specifically feminine characters, because they want the male attention to be stripped away from the gaming audience and them to be subjected to a new guide for attention seeking. This is the new standard that you should be attracted to. And I think that's the thing that we see at the focus of a lot of these new games that are being produced, where there's an attempt to change the demographic of gamers and of what they actually like and want to see in gaming. I think The Last of Us and all these other properties that came out beforehand were just the small breaking and stepping stones of what we're seeing nowadays within the industry, where gamers are just looking at gaming nowadays and they're not sure who is making the games and why are they making the games this way and for what purpose. And I think the end result is pretty clear when you see these character models these actual models in real life be kind of defeminized and masculinized with their portrayals in the video games. I think we see this clearly with Star Wars Outlaws, of course, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Horizon Forbidden West, Modern Warfare. All the female character models don't really look like the real life counterparts because it's not in line with this ideology that has captured the gaming industry, this ideology that is steeped in this body positivity, this removal of any standards at all, because everything has to be equitable, attractive wise, and of course community wise, because it's all about social cohesion and risk aversion. It's never about idealism. It's about just the status quo and everything being mundane and boring. And I think that's the thing that we see in the current gaming market, where everything is being made to be mundane and boring. And that's why gamers are just kind of sick and tired of the gaming industry itself, where it's just about not hurting other people's feelings. And that's why we have this race swap controversy for a lot of characters, because people don't want to hurt minority feelings. So they change the dynamics of the games. People are tired of certain body standards, so they bulk up characters. They give them gigantic jaws. They want to make the most hideous character because they feel like it's the most acceptable standard for the gaming audience, when the gaming audience is not really trying to have a political conversation. They're really trying to have a good experience. And I think that is why we're seeing gaming become more of a political mouthpiece. It's about these ideological standards because the people that have captured the industry are coming from an emotional, ideological standpoint that they want to see plastered all throughout the society that they're in, because they want to see themselves reflected in all society. And I think that is an element that we're seeing play out within the industry that is ruining gaming at its core. And we're missing out on all the beautiful games that we got beforehand because of this difference in actual gender dynamics that is at play within the gaming industry. And I think a lot of gamers have noticed it, but I think this article from Helen Andrews clarifies the situation even more, where we can see, hey, yeah, this is a definite thing, and we're losing out on a part of the gaming industry that was at its core, where you just had something made to be beautiful and exciting and fantastical. And we're getting that removed because we have people devoid of imagination that refuse to see the world as anything else different and want to bring everything back down to that reality. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing more specifically within the gaming world, this lack of imagination taking hold and dominating. And I think it comes from this feminizing logic that is more protective of itself and the equitable balance of society, rather than the risk and beauty that might be actually out there if you do something outside of the norm. And I think gaming used to represent that, and now it kind of doesn't with these new ideologies that have taken over the space. But that's just my 2 cents on the situation. Maybe disagree with me. Tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.